We are back again for Mend the Mind. Today, Mike is actually missing for the first time ever. He had some friends come through and they wanted to do a workout, and we had already planned this, so we figured we were just going to go ahead with it, with his blessing, of course. But I've got Kevin and Joe who do the same thing as me for work, but at different places, and that kind of means we don't do the same thing at all. So I'll give you guys a chance to introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get in with the topic.
Joe, you want to start?
Sure. My name's Joe. I work at Fort Liberty, so North Carolina. At my job, I'm sure Nick's talked about his kind of background at the job. At Liberty, it's a lot of big airborne kind of populations, so similar to Campbell. So I work within the airborne population, but then also within the soldier recovery unit. So two very, very different populations. So every day is very, very different. Background for me, kind of grew up in the Midwest a little bit. Go Chiefs. But also claim Washington State as home. Soccer, basketball, kind of my kind of love sport wise. Anything else you want to know, Nick, about introductions?
No, that's beautiful.
Fantastic. Oh, also, me and Kevin, we do have this like ongoing heated kind of rivalry with soccer teams. So if there's any animosity, it's fueled by that. It's not as personal.
Yeah, well, Joe picked the wrong of the Spanish giants to back, so he's always in the wrong. But all right, we'll see if I can give the same spiel that he just did. But Kevin, I work at Fort Greg Adams, which is in Virginia, kind of central to Southern Virginia. We are a TRADOC installation, so we're very heavy on the trainees. So soldiers go from basic to then us so that they can learn their job and then go to somewhere like Liberty to actually perform their job. Something recently that I've been enjoying quite a bit is we've gotten into the EOD training. So we have EOD phase 1, which is explosive ordnance disposal. So the bomb squad, and doing a good amount of work with their phase 1 trainees. So they learn at Greg Adams for several weeks, and then if they pass, they go down to Eglin Air Force Base to continue their training. So something I'm really excited about. I really enjoy it. It's really cool to watch and observe and really use the sports like performance enhancement skills to hopefully help them be better at defusing bombs. So that's sick.
That's pretty cool.
Also enjoying that. Yeah. From New York as well as Nick, very close by, actually, 30-ish minutes apart. Mm-hmm. But the background, soccer, basketball, lacrosse. I did track and field in college. So that's the most recent love of mine when it comes to sports. But soccer, like Joe mentioned, is probably the one I watched the most out of anything. So that's where our heated Real Madrid and Barcelona debates come in. So that'll probably come up once or twice, as you mentioned.
I have to get in the comments if they're feeling spicy, try to guess who's who, since you guys haven't said it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, true. You're right. Guess we'll find out.
Easy to tell.
And today we've got the pleasure, you might be wondering why we need 3 people that work at Army bases, but that's exactly what we wanted for this. Is a big piece of our job, actually, the founding piece of our job, is to make a more resilient Army. And resilience has been quite a buzzword. I would say in American football, I hear it just about every broadcast. It seems like this whole year. I've heard it all over the place. Maybe I'm more in tune to it, but across the board, resilience is becoming more and more common. And I don't think it's quite as complex, but I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say with that too. But we're going to talk about resilience in an everyday setting. So I'll start off by asking you guys what your definition in layman's terms is for resilience.
I mean, I also I think I'm on the same page with you, Nick, I don't think it's crazy complicated. But like the traditional definition, right, it's just being able to get through adversity, bounce back, but also like having the proactive part of resilience. So like, especially with like everyday resilience. So being able to bounce back, but also take advantage of when you can really have the opportunity to prepare yourself for those kind of resilience moments. So that's where I would kind of lead with it for like that everyday kind of type of resilience.
Yeah.
I'll try to add a little bit to that definition, because similarly, I think I could sum it up the same way, but I also think it boils down to a bit of just a confidence in your ability to actually handle those hard situations, and leaning on like your past experiences, whether or not they're the same amount of adversity or in a different realm of your life, but knowing that you've done it before and you can do it again.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think the confidence is a huge piece. I think the standard bounce back is essential. And I say our contract's centered around it. We do the one course, which obviously contractually we can't use actual language, but we can talk about psych terms. And so we have a set of different things that we teach that are very in line with psych that's open access. And that to me seems like really what the resilience is rooted in. And we teach it in a way where it's designed to be an everyday thing. It's not some fancy army training where we're like taking people out back and hosing them down like I don't know, see in a movie somewhere that's not accurate. Maybe was accurate, but is not currently accurate to my knowledge. And it's interesting to see it in the context of like really popular high octane sports now, or like watching extreme sports as well. Something that you see on like Red Bull TV or something like that. Hey, you just got to be resilient. I was riding my dirt bike trying to jump like 2 football fields, broke my arms and legs a couple of times, had to be resilient and come back. Right. And sure, there's big picture resilience and that's a thing and you can instill it in a team, but I kind of would lean more on the everyday building blocks in the common psych kind of textbook that you could find at a Goodwill somewhere. That really like builds the foundation and sets it up. I'm curious, do you guys use any, let's say, areas or topics in your own life, like something that you've really tried to develop since you got to your role that would maybe be in line with that resilient definition?
Yeah, certainly. I can go first on this one, Joe, if you want. I've been you the mic first for a couple times now, but I think the main thing that I'm trying to work in every single day is boiling it down to explanatory style. Mm-hmm. So looking at the research on optimistic versus pessimistic explanatory style, which is like definitely a huge component of it, of just like, how are you explaining the bad things, but also how are you explaining the good things that are happening in your life? And I try to catch myself when a lot of the essentials for me around like extreme language of like just simply like never or always, or things that are pushing you in the direction of pessimism and would cause you to give up essentially, versus when I hear myself say it or when I hear some other people say it, which it can quickly get on other people's nerves if I question everything that they say when it comes out of their mouth. But I think that's the biggest takeaway for me on the day to day is just when I hear something that's like more pessimistic than optimistic, I'm just like, well, what's a way we can shift that over? Or how can we just acknowledge that and be like, okay, that wasn't super helpful, but let's continue on because of it.
How do you like catch yourself doing that? Like for yourself, like, are you just trying to, like, when you have a thought that comes to mind, you're trying to reshape it in the moment, or do you like reflect at the end of the day? Like, what's your kind of like daily?
So I try to do it in the moment when possible. It's often I say it out loud and then I catch myself and I'm like, oh shit, like that didn't really work. Yes. And so it's less of the at the end of the day kind of thing. Like I'm looking back, it's I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but it's a good amount of the time, like right in the moment. Like if I say something like, oh, I'm never gonna be able to do that. I'm like, actually, yeah, no, I probably can do it. It's just, it might take a little longer or something. And I try to catch it right away. And I think because our day-to-day language is so in the job focused around something similar, it's easier to catch it because we have tuned our ears to it essentially just so we could teach it. So for me, I think even if I don't correct it in the moment, I try to just correct it in my head. Like if I would interrupt the flow of the conversation, I'll just be like, whatever. And I correct it in my own head, but knowing that I just put something fairly pessimistic out into the world.
Yeah. No, I actually like that a lot. I'm curious if that was something you were working on, I guess, prior to working in our current role, or if that's something that's really been like all steam ahead. I don't know if that's the term. So we're all moving forward on that since you started, teaching optimism in this current job.
Yeah, I think definitely because of this. I was led to the book from Martin Seligman, The Learned Optimism. And I just read through that and I was like, wow, this is great. Like everything that it's talking about, it was written years ago at this rate. It's nothing new. But once I was introduced to it and I read it, and then I was like, it's just so easy to listen and hear for the different types of explanations that people have. So when something bad occurs, it's like, okay, often they'll say it out loud if it's in a conversation, or if you're watching and observing a team, say, then it's easy to hear them verbally say something super pessimistic. And then it's like, okay, let's do something about that. So I think since getting into it before the job necessarily, I would say no, that wasn't a huge, like resilience was never like a big push. It was more like, okay, how do we use sports psych to improve performance, not necessarily handle the poor performances or anything. So I think it's a new push for me.
Yeah. Has it been contagious?
I hope so. Man, I don't know. I think so. I've noticed people, they at least like understand what I'm getting at, especially when I correct others. But I don't sit there and I'm not like rude about it and be like, that was a pessimistic thought. Like, what do? I just ask like a question of like, is that really true? Or like, do you think that's actually like impossible to learn? And then like, oh no, like probably not. I actually probably could do it. And then it's like, oh great. Like, there we go. Like, that's all I was looking for. So I think contagious might not be the correct word, because when I'm not present, would they do it? I'm not sure yet. I'm hoping that's eventually the long-term goal, but I don't know.
I appreciate that. Joe, what do you got for us over there?
Mine would be definitely going into more, for like me personally, the meditation and mindfulness aspect. At the SRU, that's something I've really, really dug into and do a lot with. People there are kind of, I would say like 90% of the people there feel like they're kind of stuck in this like bubble. And there's a lot of this ambiguity if they don't know when they're getting out, whether they're getting med boarded, whether they're going back to a unit. So a lot of people are stuck, either looking future oriented or stuck in the past of all this stuff that has happened to them and now it's impacting their present. So I found that just meditation, incorporating mindfulness into that has helped people, also myself, just realize that the more present you are, like throughout your day, throughout your week, the easier it is to get through those tough moments, because you're not as worried about the 5 things you have to do this morning, the 2 things you have to do next week, all these annoying orders you're getting from up in the Army that you'll never talk to these people, all these decisions being made around you that you have no control over. So as I've done that more at the SRU, that's really something I've started to develop like my own practice for. And I try to start every day with some kind of mindfulness, some kind of meditation, whether it's 1 minute or 5 minutes. So that's just helped me just be more in the moment and get through those resilience kind of moments throughout a day. And it seems like when you reflect back on a day, for me personally, it's felt like I've been able to get through kind of challenging things a little easier. Like it's not as hard to go out and give this brief in front of 200 people with an hour of notice. So like it's just, for me, easier to get through those kind of difficult moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's interesting that there's a lot of overlap in the mindfulness and the optimism pieces. I'm curious, and I have a feeling Kevin and I probably talked about it when we were at Drum together, but have you looked at the original flow research from like the 60s? Either of you?
Can you repeat that question? You cut out a little bit.
Uh-oh. Have you looked at the original flow research from like the 60s?
With like Mackay, Csikszentmihalyi, and all that. Definitely in grad school, but not crazy recently. But I know there's like a present moment focus you have to have. You have to be able to be in the moment to experience that flowiness and to an extent.
Yeah, so I actually use flow as part of my thesis research from my master's. So it's definitely something I looked at. I read the book flow and flow in sports. And yeah, the nine different characteristics, I can't name them all right now, which I probably should be able to do. But there are those 9 different characteristics of flow. And one of them is that, that present moment focus and basically not being pulled out in either direction, Joe, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm curious then, because Kevin sounds like an expert in this, which I love.
We'll see about that.
What did you think of the original research? If I'm tracking it correctly, it seems like it was pretty intuitive and had a very mindful element to it. But what came out of it was flow, which is wild. It never connected in my head.
Yeah. So, I was trying to essentially replicate part of that and try to show a bit of a connection between meditation and flow. Mm-hmm. So my research was providing athletes with essentially the mindful sport performance enhancement protocol, but just in a condensed format to see could it help induce flow, essentially, because meditating is essentially a flow state on its own, especially when you have practiced it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so generally there's a correlation, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, the correlation between meditating and flow. I cannot say that my results were conclusive based on population numbers. My sample size was very low. So I can't use my data, but that's what I was trying to use. And for me, it made so much sense. As soon as I read it, mindfulness was already something that I was interested in. Meditation was something that I was attempting. I wasn't very good at it yet, and as soon as I connected it with that idea of flow, it's that's the perfect segue to use it in performance. Because in theory, if you're in an optimal state of mind, you're going to perform optimally as well. And that could be a key that can help you unlock that, because, worrying thoughts can easily pull you out of flow. So being able to just sit there and accept and acknowledge them as they go by can keep you in that present moment and allow you to perform optimally. So for me, it made so much sense. And I always wanted to use it in my own athletic career. I just found it a little too late when I had already retired. So,
yeah.
I feel like that's the theme with sports psych too, is in therapy and therapists. A lot of times the joke is, what's the thing that caused you to be a therapist? And in sports, it's what would have helped you be a better performer when you were performing? Mm-hmm. But yeah. No, I love that. Do you guys prefer the not normal, but standard sitting on the floor and meditating style, or do you incorporate other styles that you like a little bit more?
I try to incorporate as many different styles as possible when I'm teaching it. So I tell people hey, you can totally do this traditional, you're sitting on the floor, however is most comfortable for you. You can do this standing up. You can do this laying down. You can do this on a walk. That's something that I found to be very powerful, is just doing not necessarily meditation, but just mindfulness on a walk. Mm-hmm. And when you do it in a group of people and everyone is trying to reach that kind of same goal of mindfulness, it's, I think, really incredible. You almost feel this weird, sense of community. It's interesting. But I think it all comes down to what method or what position style works best for you. And that's something that takes, I think, a decent amount of time. For example, there's this woman who has been coming to the meditation group for, I think, a good 6 months. She's the OG at the SRU for meditation. And she's still to this day, will come in and ask hey, I did this, but I don't think it worked for me. And can we try this in this meditation? Can we do X, Y, and Z? So she's still figuring out. It's been 6 months of her coming twice a week. Mm-hmm. So I think it varies across everyone. But once you find your magic medicine, I think can be incredible. For me, the walking one is my that's where I can lock in and really lose track of time. Mm-hmm. And you reach those kind of benefits of almost those flowy benefits. You didn't realize I just walked for an hour and a half and it feels like it was 20 minutes.
Another characteristic of flow, distortion of time. They're all going to come back to me as we start teaching.
That's one of my favorite questions to ask after leading a meditation or mindfulness thing is how long do you guys think that was? And they'll say I don't know, 7 minutes. And I was like, no, that was 20 minutes straight of this. So they just totally lose track of time.
That was cool. I feel like I have the most attempts at regular like sitting and laying down, but something that I actually discovered from a couple of my friends and co-coaching, when I was coaching track and field, was slacklining. And so I was introduced to slacklining by one of the articles we had to read for class, actually. And it was slacklining was part of a intervention used for Olympic soccer referees. So for me, here in Olympic soccer, I was like, that's great. And then here in sports psychology, I was like, that's even better. And I read the article, and part of that intervention was giving them slacklines and having them learn how to slackline, because it takes an intense amount of focus and concentration. And if you look away, or if your mind starts to wander away, you're falling off the thing. So I bought a slackline immediately, and I found out that a couple of my friends had their own too. And all my athletes that I was coaching, we all got together and we would slackline occasionally. And it was so much fun. Like, you talk about the distortion of time too. Like once I got good enough that I could actually stay on the line for a while.
Yeah.
There were sometimes it felt like the 1 minute when I was learning took like an hour. And I was like, I can't believe that was only 60 seconds. But then at the same time, once I got better at it, it was like, I could literally be on there for 10 to 15 minutes. And I was like, it felt like a snap of fingers kind of thing. And my mind was just so beyond clear when I would step off of that, because I had no choice but to sustain that attention. I would always just look at the tree ahead of me to make sure that I could find something, that I wasn't wobbling.
Yeah.
But for me, that was like my all-time favorite form. I don't even know if it counts as a form, but for me, it certainly does.
Yeah.
When you're say like you're slacklining like that, you said you're focusing on the tree. Do you try to put like all of your focus on like externally on that tree? Are you paying attention to your thoughts at all? Or are you just trying to get like as external as possible?
For me, it wouldn't even be a matter. Like, I wouldn't even be thinking, to be honest. Like, after a while, like, you could tell, like, when I was first getting up there, I'd be like, oh, I'm wobbling. Like, I can feel my little ankle muscles like twitching as I'm trying to balance. But then after a few minutes, it was just like, I would lock in, and it was just like nothing. It was so quiet that it was incredible. So if you haven't tried slacklining, give it a go. I'm going to be a spokesperson for whatever company pops up first on your Amazon search there. Buy it immediately. Buy it.
Dude, I want to try it when I come up for the bike ride.
I have it. So we'll give it a go. It's a blast.
If I break an ankle, though, you're paying my copay.
Okay, fine. That's a deal.
Do the copay.
Yeah.
Have you seen the like slacklining across buildings and like mountain stuff that people do? Wild.
Yeah.
That is wild. I'm not
but it's interesting
brave
hearing
enough
you
for that.
talk about, like, one, how the distortion of time has an effect on that, but two, how once you start to get the minute, like, it starts clicking and it starts going and it starts coming together. It's like they just did a lot of that, I would guess, right? And so it really is the small building blocks like we were talking about with resilience or something along those lines. It's a fun little metaphor.
Yeah, and if you want to I can tie it back to my first initial definition of that confidence too, and that ability. Yeah, because it's so daunting to get on the slack line at first, because it's like it's literally probably 2-3 inches wide, maybe 4 if we're lucky, probably less. And everyone that would try it was like, no way, I can't do that. They'd step on it once, they'd wobble, they'd fall off completely without even being able to get their foot off the ground. And when the first time you step on it with your foot, the whole thing shakes beneath you because it's just suspended and it's trying to move your weight. So then slowly and surely, every time you attempt it, every time you get back up onto the line, which is a big metaphor for resilience, then you get a little bit better. And then every time, like, okay, I stood up for 2 seconds that time. Like, I think I can get 3 this time, 4. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you start to get both feet on, and then you can take a step. And it's like, all right, I got 1 step, I can get 2 steps next time. And you slowly build it up where then you're walking between trees back and forth for however long you want to, and you'll never fall off. So definite metaphor of eventually you can build up the resilience or the confidence in your ability to handle whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know where this falls in the timeline. For anyone listening, I guess I've done one training with Kevin and one training with Joe, but not at the same time. But Kevin and Joe know each other because they've done trainings together too, and could visit much closer. But I was trying to come up with a measure of resilience that I could hand out. Nothing insanely valid, nothing insanely sound. Just, hey, where are we at? And can we measure some progress from point one? And the most frustrating piece to crack down on, and maybe my favorite piece of resilience, was problem solving and creativity. And that also ties in with the slacklining really, really well. But this is going to take us to our next point, but the wormhole that I have gone down, that I asked you guys if there's any that you have gone down as well, has been creativity. And I have gone so far into I'm going to call the lack of research in creativity and ways to measure it, between convergent and trying to come up with a million different things where you get like the little picture and you've got to make as many pictures of a triangle as you can, to, or I guess that'd be divergent, and then convergent, coming to one single solution. Or even like word games where you have to measure 10 words, come up with 10 words, try to make them as different as you possibly can. And the reason I've been trying to teach those is the number one thing in the Army that I have found for lack of resilience is the inability to shed rigid thinking. And so, in other words, creativity. There's just one route to the answer, and even if that route's inefficient, that's what we're taking. And I think that's a nice translation into everyday life as well, is what habits do you have that are not working for you? Just in terms of how creativity applies to resilience and how we are not resilient, would be the habits that we have formed and the inability to rethink them or find new solutions to the same problems. And so I'm curious, one, general thoughts on that, and then two, if there's not a ton, then what wormholes have you guys gone down recently?
You froze again.
Yeah, the Riverside really does not want you to answer this question.
Oh, no.
I think you're getting censored.
No, it's
I have a question
not.
for you. So you've talked about going into creativity, like trying to bring that into the Army and measure it. You also mentioned like problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
How do those overlap for you? Are those the same thing? Like when you're like presenting this to the Army, or you have something that differentiates those?
Yeah, problem solving, one answer, one way to do it. And creativity has a little bit more flexibility, multiple ways to get to the finish line, right? And so a lot of the stations and activities that we use, there's no answer key. You can get to it however you want. Just here's some parameters. And I think creativity falls more into that bucket. And if the hot streak continues with internet, the question that I had for you guys was, any thoughts on the creativity aspect, and then any wormholes that you have been down?
I think creativity could be.
Go ahead, Joe.
I think creativity could be something that I think incredibly valuable to soldiers in the Army. One like instant limitation that pops up to my head is you always hear soldiers like, it's done this way. Leadership is telling us to do it this way, and just following stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see how like you could like empower a soldier to use their creativity. But as far as like measuring it, honestly, not too sure. I think the ways that you presented of like the different activities you said, it was fascinating. I think that could definitely get like a conversation going with really kind of anyone, even outside of the Army. But yeah, those would be my thoughts on it. Any from you, Kevin?
Yeah, I think part of the level 3 prep that I was just doing, actually, one of the articles that I found was pretty interesting, and it's really not that profound, but just like the types of questions that you ask and how they can either promote creative thinking or kind of squash it. And it also can change the way you even view something too. I think a creative solution or even topic that we've been kind of going down at work recently is some of my coworkers have businesses on the side doing some consulting work. And Matt, who's one of my newer coworkers, he has been bringing up good questions of passive income and how can you make money when you're not present, essentially. And it's like, so what can you create? What can you write? What can you do? And just that question alone made me start thinking a lot more creatively. and made me start going down my own rabbit holes of what can I do as if I ever start my own, which I don't know if I will, but down the road I might. And thinking about ways like I don't necessarily need to be present for, because if I'm the commodity, if my knowledge is the actual product, then I can only ever make as much as I can sell in 24 hours a day of being present. And I think just to really tie it back together of the question part too is having a really, really important and powerful question, whatever that might be, could actually just spark someone's creativity for them without even them needing to say, I'm going to be more creative right now. If someone externally asks that question, that might be all that they need.
So you think environment plays like a legitimate role in someone's ability to be creative?
Yeah. If the question is, say we're talking about, exercise or even a specific exercise like a deadlift, if you're asking the wrong question of how do you lift it versus like what ways do you think you could get this weight to somewhere else, then one answer might be a lot different than the other. Now, I'm, no expert question asker myself. I'm just diving into this kind of idea, but it certainly could. I think the environment and who's asking it could play a big difference in how you solve that problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I like the who's asking it piece as well. If Joe asks you a question and you guys have a really good relationship, your response might be different than if a stranger comes at you and asks why you did something.
Well, so if I want to reveal our cards here, if Joe tries to ask me why Barcelona is better than Real Madrid, then of course my answer is going to be targeted at just tearing Barcelona down, because that's clearly not the correct team to support. But if it's a question of, how do you even make a good soccer team, or like what are the qualities of a good soccer team? It's like my answer is going to be vastly different, vastly more creative. I'm going to start pulling from different eras, different players, different teams, instead of just going head to head of, the good and the bad, the good guys and the bad guys there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any tips and tricks that you would be willing to share on the question asking?
I glanced at the article and it started getting me spinning. A lot of the times it's something that we've already learned as, in our degrees or just in our experiences of just more open-ended, less direct of like yes or no's, and more of like how and why and what, so that you have to answer it with more than just one word. And maybe you have to think of a different way. Even putting constraints on it and saying, okay, you can't solve it this way. How else are you going to solve it? Could be enough to get someone thinking of, okay, what are the other solutions that I could have to do?
Yeah. Something I'd add to what Kevin was saying, and this is one more that like maybe for questions that you have time to like think about, but I'm sure you both have heard it within our job, within like the train up for our job, is like knowing general answers you're trying to seek or general areas you're trying to get this person to think about, and then backwards planning from that. So like shaping the question from general responses you expect or want to dig into. That's been something that's been, I think, one of the biggest challenges for me as I've kind of grown as a performance expert, is like really just taking the time to just pause and whether it's like 3-5 seconds just to like think really intentionally about what area am I trying to guide or lead this person to. Not that I'm asking this leading question, but like what part am I trying to get them to really think about? That would be advice I would give, is backwards plans and questions if you have the time and space to do that.
And I think another piece that really stuck out to me is almost not even ending with an answer. Sometimes a question that's going to generate even more questions than it does answers can be really helpful for that creativity. Because if you're asked a question and you're like, oh, well, I wonder how it would relate to this, or if I wonder how I would teach it to someone else, or I wonder how this, and it's like all of a sudden now you have 4 new questions that stemmed from that one single question. You might not even need to get to an answer. You know, like Joe said, the direction that you want it to go in, but you don't even have an answer in mind. It's just, okay, what other questions can it make them think of?
Yeah. I think also this is more like facilitation type of skill, but just turning it over to a group or the person and saying, what do you think? Like what would be the question you ask? Because a lot of times they're already churning in their mind of what things they want to say next. And if they can just give the question to themselves or to a group, I mean, that's usually more powerful than what you could say or facilitate.
Yeah. I've always looked at it as helping people connect the dots when I'm planning things. But to your points, Emmy and I planned very differently at work. Emmy wants a script almost of everything that she can plan out. She wants to have planned and ready. I want a couple general topics and some good thought provoking questions, and I'll figure out how to transition in the middle. And so I almost intentionally come in less vague because there's no particular answer I'm looking for, like you were talking about with them coming up with their own answer and their brain's already working on it. Let's go wherever your brain goes. Who am I to tell you your brain's in the wrong spot, unless it's like a hardcore like concept we got to get down and I got to teach. But that's always been my approach to PowerPoints, which is not
how
PowerPoints typically go. But that's always a fun one when someone's expecting like a death by PowerPoint, and I'm like, all right, you guys are gonna talk the whole thing. Your guide rails here, but I don't want to talk much. Talk enough as is. Cool. What wormholes or rabbit holes have you guys gone down recently? If you have one, and we'll start.
One that I haven't gone down yet, but that I very well could go down here in the future is with one of the brigades I work with at 82nd. I have a really good relationship with their cognitive performance specialists on the H2F side. So very similar job, obviously, but just different organization. But she's on the footprint, officer on the footprint, so she has a better kind of idea of kind of the ticking of the brigade. So she approached me on helping her build this program for like underperforming soldiers and using marksmanship as like the medium to teach them all these resilience skills, all these life skills, all these performance psychology skills. So I think that's where we're both going to go down that rabbit hole of like, yes, we're going to be helping them with marksmanship, but that's really not what they're here for. They're here for helping them connect better with their peers, helping them be a better leader, whatever unit they're in, helping them be more mentally tough. Having marksmanship is kind of just that like talking point, and help them see progress in that, hopefully build confidence. But that's something I think I'm going to be definitely digging into, of how to connect different elements of marksmanship to important skills to be a better soldier, a better human being.
Are there any that come to mind?
I think
off the bat,
one that we already talked about was just the whole mental flexibility of like you're going into a situation and you expect it to go one way and it's not. Part of this, I think, when we start this program is these soldiers that are coming to us know that they're underperforming. They're coming to us for a reason, and helping them shift their perspective, have that mental flexibility to say, hey, yes, I'm here. So some acceptance too, another huge skill. But now I'm getting this training and this attention that no other soldier in my unit is getting. So this can be my like leapfrog, my trampoline to then pass fellow squad members and year down the line be a top performer. So I would say mental flexibility, acceptance, and then just that growth mindset, that foundation of what's your mindset now? Like you obviously know your situation, but where are you going from here?
I like that a lot. So with the theme of the episode, how would you apply that to everyday life?
It's a good question.
Go to the range. Start shooting.
I would connect it with consistency. So consistently having, being able to leverage the way you're thinking, kind of Kevin was talking about, like his explanatory styles. He's trying to be as consistent with that as possible. So whether finding that area that you're challenged with, maybe it's acceptance of your situation, maybe it's your ability to just take up time for yourself. So more that proactive view of resilience, of being able to take opportunity and recharge your batteries when you need. So being consistent with that. That's how I would tie it in. Then that also connects back to more consistent you are with these behaviors, X, Y, and Z. Over time, they will become habits. Over time, they will become easier. And then that goes into your daily routine, your week, your month. And then over time, you see hopefully that uptick in whatever you're searching for.
Huh. Yeah, I like that. This isn't live at this point because me and Mike recorded it pretty recently, but one of the things we talked about in a motivation piece was who motivates you really well and what do they do, and who demotivates you really well and what do they do. And then if you know those, do they match how you motivate yourself? Why or why not? And so like you're saying, taking something that you know you're underperforming at, right? What are some things you perform really well at and why do you perform well at them? What are some things you underperform at? Why do you underperform at them? And how do you shift some of those characteristics or traits? Which is an interesting concept because you get it. Most people do things well, right? Something. Why? What works? What doesn't? Use what works. It's intuitive and it's simple, but do we do it? I don't know. Dog's going crazy.
I think there's one that I have been going down a little
there?
bit that connects, I think, really well with the two of you just saying that, is just measuring. Like how, especially when it relates to us, it's like, how do you measure our effectiveness? And that's something I've been trying to figure out. And it's got me, led me down the avenue of like performance profiling or, you know, quantitative measurements and such like that. So that at the end of the day or the end of whatever, however long the period is of working with someone, you can say, okay, I had a potential influence on their improvement or, you know, whatever self-report measure they were asked. And I think that goes really well into some of those other things you're mentioning too, of on the day to day. It's like, how are you measuring yourself? Like, how are you measuring your own improvements? How are you measuring the skills that you currently have or the skills that you currently want? And then what are you doing about it? Because even just measuring it can be, that awareness can be an intervention of its own of, hey, I noticed that I'm thinking I'm about a 6 out of a 10 on this one, but it's like, I've got a 10 out of 10 on something else. So it's like, Nick, what you said of like, okay, what is causing those discrepancies and why am I a 10 out of 10 on that one? And how can I get the 6 out of 10 to be a 10 out of 10? And that's, I think, an idea I've gotten down pretty far too. And something that just was sparked today, even earlier at work, of just, okay, like I've got a lot of things that I'm working towards, and I tend to fall into the category of I get really motivated and then I want to do like 25 different things. Like I want to learn 3 different languages. I want to start a new fitness program. I want to bike across the country. Like I want to do all these crazy things. And it's like, Kevin, you have 8 hours you have to sleep or else you're going to be tired. You got 8 hours you're working, and then what? You got 8 hours left to do all of those things? Like, I don't know. That's not going to work. So for me, it's like, all right, how do I actually measure the things that I want to be doing and making at least the smallest step possible towards actually achieving that? And that's something I haven't figured out yet. I'm working on different styles of journaling, different styles of, you know, visual representation. But it's like, once you can put a finger on what am I actually doing, then the next time something's really difficult and you want to start it, it's like, okay, but look at all the progress I've made. And it ties into that confidence that I mentioned before of, you know, that previous experience of I've got 100 different things that I've been able to accomplish. And it's all because I was recording and measuring and showing myself that it's possible or showing someone else that it's possible. So I think for me, that just how measuring everything, like a mad scientist, essentially writing it down, keeping track of everything.
Question too, if you can figure out how to make that super concrete, Kevin, please use it for our field, because that's what
yeah.
constant.
I'm trying my best. Yeah. Because then it's like if anyone asks you, how do you say, yeah, I am effective? You have no way of saying that. You're like, I know
results.
That,
you can't necessarily say like, yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
Keep thinking.
Yeah. I'm trying. Yep. You too as well, please.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's interesting when you talk about that. Most of us, definitely speaking for myself here, but I venture to say others as well, measure things based off memory, right? And estimation. And those are like my 2 biggest friends for how good am I at something. You know, if you ask me how many free throws could I make, odds are I'm over or underestimating that by a little bit. And then that begs the question, are you overconfident or underconfident? And how does that impact you? Right? And so how do you get concrete forms? And I love that you brought up the journaling too, but that might be your actual best way to measure in a lot of ways is, write it down close to it so that you're not remembering, well, the last time I played basketball, I'm pretty sure I was like 6 of 10. So if I had to shoot right now, I'd probably do pretty well. I'd probably go for 8, go out there, hit 2, right? It's not good or bad that I hit 2. This is a silly example, but if I'm doing that for everything in my life, I don't know. You could even venture and say my social intelligence might not be too great. I might think other people think I'm just as good as I do, and it turns out I'm not. Everybody else is like, nah, he's bad. But you can do the same thing with like self-doubt, right? Most people are harder on themselves, so that might be more realistic. Is I'm no good at anything, and you ask the room when they're not there, and they're like, we love that person. Is that holding you back?
It also gets into the self-report measures too, because you can be measuring everything, but it could be measured wrong if you're looking through your own lens there.
Oh, so it's going to be hard to sleep after all these questions.
It's like Joe's processing. Oh man, sweet. What we usually do at the end of these episodes is one thing from the conversation today that you really liked, that you heard, or that you thought of and said, that's fine too. But something that you want to work on the next week or so and just make a little bit more deliberate and intentional.
A nod to Joe. I know we've talked about some meditation stuff before, but walking meditation or, just doing it while walking or even being mindful while walking is something that I could certainly use more of. And I think I'm going to give it a go. Maybe I'll measure it. We'll see. But I'd like to incorporate it because I do walk. I do enjoy walking. It happens all the time. And it's something so easy that you can tune into and actually walk with a little bit more present moment awareness.
Mm-hmm. Not to make this sound all cute, but nod to Kevin.
Oh, no way. Stop.
I would say the explanatory styles, like the way I think for myself, how I'm explaining things. Because little like anecdote, I generally describe myself as a pretty optimistic person. But recently, the past few weeks, I've noticed my girlfriend call me out for things that are like, hey, that's really a limiting fucking way to talk on things. Just talking about future and my abilities, things I want to do. And I'm like, what? And then it hit home and hey, this actually is kind of not maybe the best way to explain my situation or how it could be in the future. So I'd be more intentional with that, the way I'm kind of explaining things in my life.
Yeah, I love that. I also am going to go to a nod to Kevin here with the measurement. Thought about measurement a lot, but not that much on myself. And why not? Right? A little self-reflection there, a little self-awareness can't hurt. So taking even something, I would love to track how many compliments versus complaints I'm giving out in different settings. That'd be cool to know, especially with the research that we do on how negative we teach on how negative we are. So I'm curious what the actual ratio is. It's been real bad in the car lately on the carpool in and out, just every driver.
You should make this a whole project, an R2 sponsored project, and you can spread it company wide. Come talk to other sites, results.
See which bases are the best. But sweet. Well, that is, I believe this is episode 4. That's a guess, but that's okay. Nat'll just tell me I need to re-record it if I got it wrong. If you made it this far and you haven't liked or commented or subscribed, go ahead. It's free. Why not? But we look forward to any feedback that we can get from you guys on things that you liked, things you didn't like. And as always, encourage you to also think about something that you liked from the episode. You can also give a shout to Kevin. You can also give a shout to Joe. You can give a shout to Nick. Just something you want to work on. It's you working on you. So we're not here to judge it or anything like that. But thank you. And we'll catch you next time.